So I have a goal here, which is to show you how to deploy any Solidity smart contract on the Ropsten test network. And I'm roughly following the material that exists right now in Mastering Ethereum, which has been very helpful. Um, I'm not sure what it'll look like when you read this, if you're watching this video far in the future. Um, but let's start with Infura. So Infura is a web-based service that lets you get around running your own test network. Um, so I don't have time to download the Ropsten test network, and I don't want to run it on my computer, so I can get around that using Infura. So I guess I'll do this completely from scratch. So let's Google Infura, and then their website comes up, and you have to share your email address with them, but that's basically all. And then say you're not a robot. After you do that, what happens is you get an email like this one. I will open it like this. So these are references to instances of these Ethereum networks that are running on the Infura system. And you can use these networks from your machine as opposed to running Ropsten yourself. So if you want to use a private network, then you don't need Infura. This is just if you want to deploy contracts on Ropsten. So I chose to do it that way because that's what the tutorial said. And had some good luck with it. So you have to, I don't know if you can see this, it says that you need to install the Truffle HD wallet provider, and I did that, and I also installed Truffle, so I'm going to assume that you just have Truffle installed. So in this directory here I have a smart contract called voting.sol. I forgot where I got it, but I'm sure if you Google parts of it you can figure it out. So the contract name is ballot, and I don't really care what it does. I just picked it kind of arbitrarily, and I want to compile it and deploy it. So here I actually did compile it into its application binary interface and into its Ethereum bytecode. So, and I learned by reading Mastering Ethereum that I just need to send this binary information to the 0 address on the Ropsten test network, and that will deploy the contract. But it's hard to find, tools that let you do that easily. So let's use Truffle. So I'll start with a completely new directory. So I'll make a directory just for this example, which we call it T781. That's a good name. And go into T781 and observe that it is completely empty. And I will type truffle init, and this will create some stuff. So the contracts folder is where your contracts go. I'll talk about migrations in a second, and I'll talk about test later too. So we have 2 configuration files here. Let's look at those configuration files. To be honest, I don't know what this one is for. It might just be 2 different names for the same thing, but I'm going to use truffle.js. So this needs to be modified in the way that's described in the tutorial here. So I need to add a few lines. Here, split screen might work well. I think if you put this on high resolution, you should be able to see it better if it's not automatically on high resolution. So I'll paste this in. By the way, there's if you're using Vim or maybe anything, you have to replace these quote marks with real quote marks. Those are fancy quote marks in some non-standard font. So replace them with ASCII quote marks. And you need a mnemonic for an HD Ethereum wallet. So how do you get one of those? You have to use, well, you don't have to, but I chose to use MetaMask to do this part. Let me sign out and just do everything all over again. So can I just sign completely out? Can you just forget that I exist, MetaMask? This is frustrating. Actually, it looks like I'm not going to be able to completely delete this MetaMask stuff I can't figure out how to make it forget who I am anyway. So unfortunately, now I have to go through this part of Mastering Ethereum where they talk about MetaMask and getting money from the faucet. But that's basically what you need to do is look at the introduction to Mastering Bitcoin and go to the section on MetaMask. You need to install MetaMask as an extension to your browser, and you type in a passphrase, and the passphrase goes through what do they call it? A KDF, a key derivation function, and it produces a seed for an HD Ethereum wallet, and you get a mnemonic, which is 12 words. So here is the mnemonic that I got. It's just 12 random words. It has math in it, which makes it awesome. So, and grief. I've generated a couple of these, and they never look random. It's something weird about the human mind, I guess. So that's my mnemonic. So I will come back here, and since I logged out, I need to restore. Oh, is that the password? Restore from seed phrase. Okay, so here's my 12-word secret. And do I remember my... I'm sorry about this. I knew some bad things would happen. This is my password. And this dumb fox goes away every time you turn your head around. So you can see I have a little bit of ether, and I had to change this pull-down menu to the Ropsten test network. If you don't have any ether, it's no problem. You can just use the faucet to get some. You click on this button. It doesn't happen instantly because that transaction has to be mined on the Ropsten test network, so you have to be a little bit polite. Patient. Politeness is a good virtue also. So you have to wait for that transaction to be mined. But you have to have at least a little bit of ether to make this work because you need to pay the gas money for getting your contract deployed. Okay, so let's come back to, I'll do the split screen again, and let's look here. So now I need to define my mnemonic. Paste. And something weird happened because I'm using Vim and I pasted when I wasn't in input mode. So again, you have to be careful about those fancy quotes. Do I still have my, do I still have my mnemonic on the clipboard? No. Here's my mnemonic. Alright, and that looks weird. Is that really okay? I guess so. Alright, we'll see what happens anyway. Okay, so I need to put some stuff in here. So what goes in there? Man, half this tutorial is just me fighting with Vim. Ah, stupid thing. I'm better at Vim than this. This is embarrassing. So I'll come back to the book, and you have to specify some networks at least, and we're going to use the Ropsten network, and this is going to be the part that connects what we're doing to Infura, which we talked about earlier. So I'll copy and paste this stuff and paste it into here, and I have to be careful because I don't want to nest this. So paste. All right, and I need to use my actual access token, I guess probably I could get into trouble for sharing my access token on the internet. Oh, and you have to be careful about these quotes. Okay, and what is my access token? I need this number, this alphanumeric. Okay, and I'll get rid of the space there. All right, so before when I did this, I had to add some things, but we'll just see what happens following the instructions as they're written in the book. All right, so I'm set up now. I need to move the code that I want into the contracts folder. So right now there's nothing in the contracts folder except for migrations. There's always a default migrations file. So I will copy the voting voting.sol source code into the contracts folder. Okay, and now let's see what happens if we do truffle compile. I believe something bad will happen. I've already done this before and I had a lot of problems and I made notes about how to fix them. I think the problem here is that I'm just missing a close quote. You guys were probably screaming into your screens about that before. Yeah, something is weird here. Is that going to fix it? Okay, so something good is happening. All right, and now it says migrate to the network. Well, what could be simpler? Actually, you have to write a migration file to migrate it to the network. But let's try that anyway and see what happens. This part about network Ropsten is important. Oh, I misspelled Ropsten. Stop. All right. So I believe this will deploy the default. Oh, it didn't even deploy the default thing. So this added no contracts to the network, which is not good because we want to add contracts to the network. So how can we fix this? We need to go into migrations. And right now there is just one migration. Evidently, I don't know if it's, I haven't tested this, but the documentation that I've read says that you should number these things with so that the number is leading. So this will be the second migration. And what these migration files do is they move your contracts onto the network, and the reason you need a series of them is because as you develop your code, you'll add more and more contracts, and you don't want to pay to redeploy the old ones. In fact, that might mess things up, and so you write a sequence of migration files just to migrate out the new contracts that you've written. So let's call this migrate voting.js. So there's nothing there right now. Actually, let's just copy the other one into this one and work on it from there. So this is the default. So I'm going to change this to my contract. And this is a reference to a source file, but you actually want this to be a reference to the name of your contract. So in the voting file, maybe I can show you here. Oh, this is very small. I'll do it and then I'll prove it. So the name of the contract that we're interested in is called ballot. And let me just go dump it to the screen for you so you can see. So right here, the contract is called ballot, and that is what you want to use in your migration file. And where were we? Right here. So you have to deploy it So this needs to be my contract. All right, so in some cases I believe that's all that you need to do, but there's a wrinkle with the contract that we've chosen. And if I leave here and go look at it again, I'll show you what I mean. So here's our contract ballot. So contracts have constructors. If you go down to the constructor for this contract, you see that it takes a parameter. So if you try to use the code that we've written, it will complain that the constructor is missing its parameters. So let's go back and put in the parameters. So I'm not a JavaScript master. It took me a few tries to figure out how to do this. So the way to do it is to use something like Python list notation, and I guess we could pick things that approximately match the voting theme, sheriff and judge, whatever. All right, so those will be the ballot constructor parameters, and I believe, you know, I actually had to modify this one more time, but let's just see what happens here. So I'll come back to the truffle root and I'll say truffle compile. That compile is the right keyword, right? Okay. All right, great. And now let's try the deploy thing again. Oh, sorry, deploy is an alias for migrate. We'll do truffle migrate -- network Ropsten. And let's see what happens. So when I did this earlier, it complained to me about not having enough gas. And I tried several things to fix this. And I forgot exactly what they were. So let's go back to the worked or the stuff that I did when I eventually solved all these problems earlier. One thing I did was I added this line gas 500,000 right there. I think that might have caused another problem, but I also think that it fixes our current problem. So I'm going to copy that. Where are we? Oh yeah, good old T781. And let's go into truffle.js and add this line. Oh man, now I've forgotten where it went. I think it goes here. Right. Let's try that anyway. Truffle compile. It doesn't like that, and now I have to go look at that other file. I'm sorry, this is very boring for you. So we'll go back to truff and truffle.js. So yeah, so my mistake was that this actually goes inside the network thing. So we have to go move it up there. Double D, P. All right. Unexpected identifier. I forgot the comma. See the comma that comes after the 3? And I'm just wasting your time. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so great. Now let's try migrating again. And network is Ropsten. Okay, so it seems to, what we're waiting on now, I believe, is for this transaction to be mined on the Ropsten network, and so you'll have to reduce your expectations for the high level of excitement that's existed in this video so far, because brace yourself, it's going to get a little boring waiting for these transactions to be mined. And furthermore, I expect this to fail because it failed when I did it, but I want to show you how to fix it when it fails. Maybe we'll get unlucky and it will just work. So in the meantime, enjoy listening to me eat an apple. Mmm. Mmm. What a good apple. By the way, this is a downside to using Ropsten, because if we were using test RPC, I believe this happens pretty much instantly. So what just happened is our migration contract was just successfully mined, and now it's trying to deploy the ballot contract, and I suppose this will be the transaction ID, but I think this will fail. Oh, I get the numbering now, right? The numbering is important because of the dependencies. So it has to first deploy the migration contract before it can deploy our contract, because there's a dependency. All right, this is what it said. The contract code couldn't be stored. Please check your gas amount. So I suppose that we are not paying the miners enough to put this contract on the network, and I think there's probably a more elegant solution to this problem than the one that I have found, but I can only know what I know. So let's go to migration, the migration folder, and look at our migration script. So here we can add something else. In curly brackets you can say gas colon and then some big number. I think what I put before is 400,000. Close. Alright, and now I believe it will work, but unfortunately we've got to pass the time again eating our apple. I guess you could forward, I mean, you control the video, so could go forward. Are you still here? Everybody who went forward is a loser. I didn't say that before. Okay, so while that's happening, maybe we can do something. You notice there's a transaction ID here, and it would be cool to look on the Ropsten net and see what happened this time. This is a little scary because I actually don't know what the problem might be. All right, so I'm going to look at the code where I had fixed this problem before, back in Truff. Migrations. Right, and let's look at what I did then. So the gas is actually 4.6 million. So I guess the number that I had before was just too small. So we'll go back to where we were, and vim to blah. So let's just change this to 5 million. OK. Alright. And we'll compile again. And we will, after that happens, we will do the migration one more time. Okay, and while we're doing that, let's go look at the Ropsten Block Explorer. I have a link to it here in my notes. Exceeds block gas limit. This is very frustrating. What if I just overwrite this thing with the other one? Or what's the difference? Okay, so let's look at what I have here. And let's look at the other one. Oh, you know what? I think I have it. So let's go into contracts and look at the code, okay? Because I Googled this problem and I tried several things to fix this problem. And one suggestion was to make the constructor payable, which is an attribute that a constructor should have. So I've just added that. After public, I said that the constructor is also payable. All right, so try it again. Truffle compile, and then truffle migrate. Okay, so let's go look at the Ropsten Block Explorer. Okay, let's dump the other one to the screen and see if we can see what the difference is between the one that works and the one that doesn't work. So they look very similar. Here's the one we have. My contract artifacts.require ballot. Function deployer, deploy my contract, gas, blah blah blah. And now this says gas so and so. So maybe the problem is that oh, I think I understand now. I think the problem is that the block will not accept contracts with our transactions with a high gas limit. So this number was too high instead of too small. So let's see if that works. So the reason I made this video is because I wanted to go through this headache, you know, with you. I've already been through it on my own, but intrinsic gas too low. This thing is an idiot. What if I change it to 4.6? We know that it was about 4.6 million before. So let's try that. This is going to be a long video. And we'll try the migrate. And it's been at least it's been failing quickly. Is it going to do that again? Okay, so it got to this point at least. I don't think it had gotten there last few times. As soon as that works, we're going to go to the Ropsten Block Explorer. Did I cut that or something? Yeah, I cut it for some reason. So I'll copy it. It's just ropsten.etherscan.io. And it looks like ballot, it worked. Okay, so ballot was deployed, and it has a cool contract ID that begins with a lot of C's. Okay, awesome. You know, I bet we can even just construct the whole URL here. I know you probably can't see this very well, and I'm sorry, but what I'm doing is I'm typing in ropsten.etherscan.io/address, but it's not an address that we want, is it? It's a transaction. Okay, let's just copy this and paste it in here. So this is the Ropsten block explorer, and we'll take the ID. Is that the address? That might be the address. I don't know if that's the address of the contract or the hash of the transaction. So it seems like it's the address of the contract. So here it is. It's been mined on. Oh, this it says right here. So it's been mined on the Ropsten network, and there's some information here about it. It has no ether. Nobody has done any transactions with it. And there's contract code, but you know, you would need a decompiler to go back to the Solidity code, or you can publish your contract on this site. I've noticed a lot of people have done that. There's the so it tells you that the parameters of the constructor. So these are these sheriff and judge or whatever words I made up. Okay, so what now? Now we have to write the code to test the thing. So let's look in the test file. Nothing. So instead of boring you with that, let me just copy the test code from Truff. So let's copy that to test. So one thing I discovered that actually made a couple more mistakes that I won't bore you with. Something about this naming scheme is important. So I don't know if it's at the level of the file name or if it's the code inside, but let me look at this stuff. So here I call this contract test ballot, and before I had made up a whimsical name and I was having a lot of problems, but when I used this naming scheme, those problems went away. And now I can do truffle compile, I believe I need to do, and then I can do truffle test. So I didn't put any assertions in my test. That was a pretty lame test. I think it just calls the constructor. Oh no, not the constructor. What does it do? I don't know. Nothing really. So in a second it should pass the test. You can put in more things, you know, to interact with it. It says 0 passing. I guess that's because I didn't put any asserts, and that might count the number of assertions passed or something. So Truffle has really great documentation. This is from the pet shop tutorial, and they talk about how to develop the test file further to test other things. And that's about it. So we compiled and deployed a random contract, and how do you interact with it once you have it deployed? It's through this test code. So we're not serving dApps yet, but we can compile and deploy and test contracts. That's the end of the video.